Every single video right now about the NCIS director vacancy is making the same argument. McGee, 23 years, original cast member, Vance's dying words, the logical successor, and I have made that case myself. I believe every word of it, but I have been thinking about something else entirely lately. Something that nobody seems to want to say out loud. And the more I think about it, the more I believe the most interesting thing this show could do, the most dramatically powerful and emotionally satisfying thing, is put Alden Parker in that chair instead. Not because McGee does not deserve it, but because Parker needs it in a way that McGee simply does not. And I think the show has been quietly telling us that all season long without anyone paying close enough attention. Let me take you through this properly, because this argument is a lot stronger than you think. First, let's go back to where season 23 began. Because you cannot make the case for Parker as director without understanding what this season did to him and what it revealed about who he actually is underneath all that controlled intensity. His father was murdered using his own gun, and Parker did not grieve quietly. He went after Marino with everything he had. He went rogue. He dragged his entire team into a personal vendetta that Vance himself had to bench him for. Vance looked Parker directly in the eye and said, "I do not want to turn this manhunt into a massacre." And Parker kept going anyway. He found a way around every barrier. And the team, Torres, McGee, Knight, all of them stayed with him. Not because they were ordered to, because they chose to. Because whatever complicated, anger-driven, deeply flawed human being Parker is, the people around him would rather stand in that fire with him than watch him burn alone. And I honestly cannot think of a better quality in a director than that. Not the anger, the loyalty he inspires despite it. The fact that this team looks at a man going to war with his own worst instincts and says, "We are not leaving," that is not something you teach in a management seminar. That is not something you develop by being the most qualified person in the room. That is something you either have or you do not. And Parker has it in a way that is completely unique in the current NCIS lineup. Now let's talk about what happened after all of that, because this is the part of the season 23 story that I think gets overlooked in every conversation about the director vacancy. Parker and Vance cleared the air. After months of genuine tension, after Vance benching him, after Parker going around him, after the friction between them that ran through the first half of the season, they sat down and actually talked. And Vance chose in his final weeks to repair that relationship rather than let it stay broken. He invested in Parker. He chose to believe in him. And then Vance died. And Parker was one of the people left carrying that loss the hardest. Think about what that means. Vance spent 18 seasons reading people for a living. He knew Parker's flaws better than anyone. He had watched him go rogue, watched him snap at his own team, watched him operate at the edge of what the job allows. And his final decision about Parker was to choose trust over doubt. To choose investment over distance. That is not a small thing. That is Vance, the man who ran this agency for 18 years, telling us with his actions exactly who Parker is capable of becoming. And I honestly think the show put that reconciliation in the story deliberately. Not just for emotional payoff, but as a passing of the torch that nobody recognized as a passing of the torch because it was too quiet to notice. Now, I know the argument against Parker, because Gary Cole himself made it in an interview after the 500th episode. He said Parker has got a little too many anger issues, and he is not wrong. I am not going to pretend he is wrong. Parker in the field during the Marino arc, Parker losing control in moments of grief and rage, Parker making decisions that put his own team at risk because his emotions were driving faster than his judgment, none of that looks like director material when you list it out. But here is what I want you to sit with. Every transformative leader this show has ever had looked wrong for the job before they were in it. Vance himself was not liked when he arrived. The showrunner said it openly. People would meet him in the early days and say, "I do not like that director guy," because he was difficult, because he came in as an antagonist, because he was not Gibbs and nobody was ready to accept anyone who was not Gibbs. And then years passed, and the character grew, and Vance became one of the most beloved figures in the entire history of this show. The showrunner said, They literally modeled Parker's introduction on the Tommy Lee Jones and Harrison Ford dynamic in The Fugitive, a man who enters as an adversary and earns your love over time by revealing his righteousness. Through action. The show already knows how to take a character with rough edges and transform them into something that moves you. They did it with Vance for 18 seasons. And they have spent 4 seasons doing exactly the same thing with Parker. The anger issues that make him look wrong for the director position are the same energy that made the audience fall in love with him. And channeling that energy from behind a director's desk instead of in the field does not diminish it. It focuses it. It gives it consequence. And then there is what Torres said. Wilmer Valderrama said in an interview that his personal vote for director was always Parker. And he said something more important than just casting his vote. He said Parker also likes to be in the field. And that right there is the thing I want to build the rest of this argument on. Because Parker becoming director does not mean Parker stops being Parker. It does not mean he becomes a politician who manages from a safe distance and speaks in carefully worded press statements. It means Parker brings everything he is, the instincts, the street intelligence, the refusal to treat field agents as expendable pieces on a board into a role that has never been held by someone like him before. Vance was brilliant at navigating institutional power. He understood how to work Washington, how to manage congressional relationships, how to protect the agency through diplomacy and compromise. Parker is the opposite of all of that. Parker is a man who has never once in his career cared what the people above him thought if he believed the people below him needed protecting. And I honestly think that is exactly what NCIS needs in a director right now. Not another politician, not another operator who plays the game. Someone who picks up the phone when a field agent calls at 2 inches the morning and says, "I am coming in. Do not touch anything until I get there." Someone whose team knows that the person behind that desk on the 6th floor has been exactly where they are standing, has felt exactly what they are feeling, and is not going to make decisions about their lives from a comfortable remove. That is a director this show has never had before, and I want to see it. Now here's where the argument gets even more interesting, because Parker becoming director does not sacrifice McGee. It actually gives McGee the best possible version of his own story at exactly the right time. Parker moves upstairs. McGee becomes the new lead of the MCRT. Not second in command, not the person who manages things when Parker is not around, the actual lead. After 23 years of being the most experienced person in that bullpen, after all of season 22 building his story, after all of season 23, finally giving Sean Murray the material he deserves, McGee steps into the field leadership role that has been waiting for him since the moment Gibbs walked out the door. He stays in every episode. He leads every case. He mentors Torres and Knight. He is the institutional memory of the team and the person making the calls in the field simultaneously. He never has to go upstairs. He never has to sit behind a desk. He never has to become the thing I wrote an entire other video about not wanting him to become. That is the best version of both stories. Parker elevated into something he has to grow to fill. McGee exactly where he belongs. Neither one sacrificed for the other. And the Mateo storyline makes this even more important than people are acknowledging. McGee just found out he has a son, an 18-year-old he never knew existed. And the ripple effects of that discovery are going to run through every episode of season 24. That story needs McGee in the bullpen. It needs him in scenes with his team where we can watch him process what this means in real time. It needs him accessible and present and human. A directorship takes him away from all of that and puts him in an office where the Mateo story becomes a side note rather than a thread woven through everything. Keeping McGee in the field protects one of the most emotionally rich storylines this show has set up in years, and I honestly think that matters as much as anything else in this conversation. Now, let's talk about the scene that I think has been hiding in plain sight all season. Parker standing outside Vance's closed office door after the funeral, alone, looking at that door. And he says, "You made it look easy, Leon." 5 words, and then he walks away. And I could not stop thinking about that moment for days after I watched it. Because that line was not written for a man who is going to stay in the field forever. That line was written for a man who is beginning to understand, maybe for the first time, that the office behind that door might be where he is supposed to go next. The show does not write moments like that without intention. They never have. And that quiet scene in an empty hallway after a funeral is the most important piece of evidence we have about where Parker's story is actually heading. And there is one more thing I want to say, something that the showrunner Steven Binder said in an interview that every NCIS fan needs to sit with. He said, "The writers have played around with the idea that the director position might not be filled immediately, that interim people keep parading through, that the vacancy itself becomes part of the story, which tells me season 24 is not going to open with a clean, neat answer. It is going to open with a question, with uncertainty. With the team operating in a power vacuum that creates new pressures and new dynamics and new stories that the show has never been able to tell before, and in that environment, in that period of instability and transition, Parker stepping into the role is not just a promotion. It is Parker choosing to be the thing this agency needs, even though it costs him the thing he loves most, which is being in the field, which is being the man with the gun rather than the man behind the desk. That sacrifice Parker giving up what he loves to become what the agency needs is one of the most powerful character stories this show could tell in season 24. And I honestly believe the writers know it. NCIS Season 23 has 2 episodes left before the finale, Tuesdays at 8 on CBS. New episodes stream the next day on Paramount+. And Season 24 is already confirmed renewed back in January, so whatever this finale sets up is not an ending. It is a beginning. The director's chair is still empty. The answer is still coming. And after everything this season has built, after Parker and Vance clearing the air, after that hallway scene, after Torres casting his vote, after all of it, I honestly think the show is about to do something that surprises every single one of us. And I think it is going to be Parker, standing in that office, looking out the window at the Navy Yard below, understanding for the first time what Vance was actually protecting all those years, and deciding to protect it the only way Parker knows how, with everything he has. No compromises, no politics, no safe distance. That is the director NCIS has never had, and that is the director I want to watch this show become. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think Parker should be the new NCIS director, or are you still Team McGee? And if Parker does become director, which moment from this season do you think the writers were building toward all along? Because after everything we have watched in season 23, I think the answer to that question is closer than anyone realizes.